Hey everybody, Steve Hoffman here at GTN. We got over 400 people registered for this webinar, so I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes, let folks get logged in and settled in before we begin. So hang tight and we'll begin momentarily. Everybody, if you're just jumping on now, we're just going to get started in about another 30-40 seconds. So bear with us. I want to give folks a little bit of time to get logged in and settled in. All right, everybody, it's officially 2 minutes past the hour. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Steve Hoffman. I'm the Director of Business Development with GTN, Global Tax Network. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you here today for our webinar on global mobility service providers, how to get the job done locally and around the world. Today's webinar is brought to you by Corporate Living, Envoy Global, Global Tax Network, Paramount Transportation, and our continuing education sponsor is Roth Mortgage. So as a reminder, all of our attendees are in listen-only mode. During panel discussion, if you have questions, please use the chat feature to ask your questions, and I'll try to get to them. If for some reason I'm not able to get to all of them, we'll follow up by email to answer those questions. I just lost my PowerPoint, bear with me. And so we have a lot of continuing education credits to offer today, thankfully. So we have one GMS and one CRP is what this webinar is good for. Again, this is provided to us by Roth Mortgage. The live version seminar ID is 16300. Again, that's 16300. The recorded version is 16301. 16301. We're also fortunate to have SHRM credits as well, and this is provided to us by Envoy Global. So for the SHRM and HRCI credits, you can see they're right up here, but I'll just read it off for those of you that are dialing in by telephone. The activity ID for the SHRM credit is 20-WWQ2X. Again, that's 20-WWQX. And the HRCI credit is 533922. Again, that's 533922. And this brings us to our agenda. Well, I'm pretty much all done with the opening remarks, and we have a great panel discussion lined up for you. Rather than me talk and tell you about our panelists, at this point in time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ask all the panelists to turn on their webcams and have them introduce themselves.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm going to kick this off. My name is Alicia Browne, and I am from Foxborough, Massachusetts. I work at Sensata Technologies. I've been there for 1 year, just about to the day. So Sensata is a world leader in sensors and controls that are designed to make the world cleaner, safer, and more efficient. We have 47,000 unique products, and you can find them anywhere from automotive braking systems to aircraft flight controls. So probably everything in your home has some Sensata product in it. So we have locations in 11 countries around the world, and our Most popular locations for our assignments and relocations are Bulgaria, Mexico, Netherlands, UK, and US. And I have 15 years of experience in the global mobility industry. We at Sensata, our program consists of managing immigration globally, as well as international and domestic assignments and international and domestic relocations and business travelers and commuters. So that's a little bit about what I do for a living. And personally, I guess an interesting thing is that I've lived in Massachusetts my whole life and spent only 1 year outside of it and living in Michigan, where I met really nice people and had a great time. So shout out to anyone from that Detroit area.
All right, thank you, Alicia. Now I'm going to bring on Mark Tirpak, who's going to do his best Chris Hall impression. Unfortunately, Chris had something come up at the last minute, so Mark was able to step in. Mark?
Yeah, good morning. So my name is Mark Tirpak. I'm a managing director with Global Tax Network based in the Woodlands, Texas. I've been in the expat tax field for the past 20 years, former expat myself, having spent quite a few years in Japan. That's where I started my career. I guess something interesting about me, besides the fact I lived in Japan, is prior to getting into the expat tax field, I actually taught English for about 8.5 years. So this is a second career for me.
And another interesting fact is he did learn Japanese while he was in Japan, so he's fluent Japanese, which we like very much. Moving on, Colin.
Yes, good morning. My name is Colin LaBrie. I'm from Paramount Transportation Systems. I am sitting at our Boston office, which is located in Foxborough, Massachusetts. In my role as the general manager, I'm responsible for the overall service delivery and operations of this office. We do have physical packers and helpers and drivers here. I have been with the company since 2007 and started in the industry as a helper in 2002 when I was in high school. Yeah, like Alicia, I've lived in Massachusetts my entire life. And even though I've been in the relocation industry for my whole career, I could never actually imagine having to relocate. That would be awful. And I feel for our transferees. So I know that it may be exciting for most of them, but personally, I'd have a hard time leaving the great city of Boston in this great state of Massachusetts.
Well said, but I don't mind saying so, being from the Boston area myself. Moving on to Stephanie Lewin. You're on mute, Stephanie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Stephanie Lewin, and I am located in the Chicagoland area. I am head of global immigration for Envoy Global. Envoy Global provides U.S. and global immigration service, and we combine access to top legal talent with proprietary technology to bring efficiency and transparency to the immigration process, creating an intuitive and collaborative experience for employers and employees. Effectively, sorry, so something interesting about myself. I spent 7 years as an expat. I am a naturalized British citizen. I was naturalized in 2013, so I like to practice what I do for a living. And in addition to that, my husband is British, and he got his permanent green card in March this year. So very exciting times.
All right then, thank you for that. And last, we have John Verrell.
Thanks, Steve. So my name is John Verrell. I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Corporate Living. Corporate Living is a global provider of corporate housing across 163 countries. We are women-owned, and we've been in business, proudly to say, for 27 years. Personally, I've been in the industry for 8 years. I was actually welcomed to the industry from an RMC, a relocation management company. And I guess the interesting fact that I have is to copy Alicia and Colin and say that I've been in Boston my entire life, never lived outside of it, and I agree, I love the city, and I couldn't imagine leaving right now, so I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, John. I always encourage people to do a little bit of travel and live elsewhere. I do live in the Boston area, but I've lived in Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Georgia. That's where I did my expat assignment. Very different. People there were outstanding. All right, we're going to get into the panel questions now. The first one is going to be for Stephanie, and then everybody else can just add their thoughts. Stephanie, managing deliverables on a global scale can seem like a daunting task. How does your company accomplish this while maintaining quality control? And do you have a vetting process for your international partners and/or resources?
Great, thank you, Steve. Great question. So yes, so as head of global immigration, we partner with over 150 different partners in the same or more amount of countries. And so, we do have to have a very thorough vetting process in place to ensure that not only are our standards met in terms of key performance indicators and SLAs in terms of turnaround times, we also have to ensure that they have the required knowledge base in their country. From the immigration process, we tend to work oftentimes with law firms who are recognized for their service and contribution to immigration in their various countries, so we can bring our customers the best knowledge possible from a global perspective. And I think what's increasingly important are really two things: is number one, compliance with privacy regulations, as we see, the European Union having rolled out its privacy regulation, California rolling out its privacy regulation, various countries. And so really compliance with privacy regulations, because we've got foreign nationals going all over the world. And so the regulations may differ from where they're coming from and where they're going to. So compliance is fundamental. And then in addition to that, ensuring that they're also compliant with any foreign, like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, is also key. And so yes, it is a continual balance to ensure that that we have the right partners, they're able to deliver the high service expectations, but they're also able to be compliant with privacy regulations and security regulations on top of that as well.
And Stephanie, for the folks that listening in that aren't familiar with the term or the acronym there, SLAs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so service level agreement. So effectively, for example, if we have a query from one of our customers, our turnaround time is sometimes within 2 hours, sometimes same business day, depending on the location. So we need to ensure that so with the SLAs, we need to ensure that our the partners that we work with are able to meet the exact same turnaround times we've promised our customers.
So excellent. Does anybody else on this panel want to chime in with their thoughts?
I'll piggyback, Stephanie. That was well said. And I know in the corporate housing world, it's very similar. We have a compliance team, a supply chain management team that is constantly doing pretty much everything that Stephanie said on a global basis in over 150 countries. And as you can imagine, SLAs have to be there. In today's world, it can't just be a lead that comes in and we send it out to every partner that we work with or every supplier that we work with. It has to be a very strict vetting process. And that's done through financial credit checking, annual reviews to make sure that they're up to par on their SLAs. And just constant communication. I think communication nowadays is more key than ever to maintain that all your suppliers, no matter what area in the country or world they're in, are doing okay, doing fine during what's going on, especially. So I couldn't echo enough what Stephanie said in terms of how supply chain is managed on a global basis. And like I said, communication, I think, is the most important thing. So how engaged you are with your partners, with your suppliers, I think that's going to really dictate what the service delivery is going to look like at the end or for the end user. And we're fortunate enough, like I said, we're in business for 27 years, so we have strong relationships that are able to do that. But I couldn't agree more with you, Stephanie. That's well said.
Anybody else want to share their thoughts on this?
I just would like to say that it's really great to know that all of the providers are being vetted so carefully, and that our providers are also being compliant. One of the most important things we want for employees is to have an excellent experience so that they can settle in and their family's happy and they can get to work right away. So from a corporate perspective, it's so important for us.
Excellent. Thank you. Actually, I was going to ask you for your corporate perspective, and you beat me to it. So, All right.
You know, before we continue, that also becomes even more important now with COVID-19, making sure that our providers have in place the necessary measures to make sure that, you know, they're wearing masks or they have hand sanitizer. Especially that becomes important for us as a moving provider.
That is definitely true. All right, we're ready to move on to the next question. The next question, we're going to start off with Colin, and it is about communication. So communication is key for any global business. For the service providers, how do you communicate effectively with your resources globally, as well as the end recipient, signee of your services? And is a single point of contact a realistic expectation for the clients?
Sure, Steve. So given the varied global time zones and, of course, usual and customary communication practices in each global marketplace, it's really important to establish communication methods and timeliness to ensure that both our on-the-ground service partners and client assignees are comfortable with from the onset. We've really got to incorporate a pre-move timeline along with each party's respective responsibilities, including the assignee. In any international move, of course, we always have an origin agent, the company that's going to pack and wrap the goods and load them. And we have, you know, a freight carrier. That freight carrier really doesn't ever communicate with the transferee. But then we do have a destination agent that is going to customs clear the shipment and deliver it. That agent, you know, does have to many times communicate with the transferee. And then sometimes we have ourselves as the forwarder. Oftentimes, we have our own office in either the origin or destination country, which helps to make communication easier. We make every effort to explain to our client in our first introduction what their move timeline will look like, as well as what the roles are of the respective providers that are involved in their move. Of course, it's always effective to have live communication. We know, though, that that isn't always a reality. Regardless, our end goal is to provide a hand-holding level of service so that transferee feels comfortable coming to us with any concerns. When live communication is available, we make sure to be well prepared with all advanced and follow-up written communication. In our first communications with that assignee, we do want to establish what works best for them, and we want to establish what the realistic expectations are right from the start. That is both for the expected service delivery and for the available communication options. Written follow-up may appear to be overkill, but it is always helpful to eliminate those hiccups along the way. Right? For a single point of contact, we can provide that. However, it can be difficult, it can be challenging, particularly in a global household goods moves. For obvious reasons, we have the complexities of customs clearance procedures that vary from country to country. Now, but that being said, it is important for us to always establish ourselves as that single point of accountability. That is where does the buck stop on each service, whether it's at origin or destination, with the named parties in each aspect of their move, from the move timeline to the ground delivery to overall management of the process.
I like that, single point of accountability. Very well said.
If I could piggyback on that single point of contact question, because it is a question that comes up in RFPs for mobility tax services quite often. And it's common practice in the mobility tax field to have a home country and a host country tax contact. The opportunities for one team to be able to do both countries' tax services, they're there, but they're fairly limited. But what we do to address that situation at GTN is when we have the initial communication with a transferee or a new assignee, we not only introduce the home and host country tax contacts, but we also provide the contact information for the managing director and one other team member in the GTN US office that has the overall client relationship. And that helps to ensure that whenever the assignee or the transferee has any questions or issues, they have another point of contact they can reach out to. And then with regards to our connections with our corporate HR contacts and global mobility contacts, we make sure that we have a high-level resource at the director or managing director level, someone who's got 15, 20 plus years of experience in mobility taxes as their primary contact that they can go to whenever they have questions, so that rather than the HR or global mobility contact trying to reach out to each individual country contact, they go to the engagement team. And because of the years of experience that the primary contacts have, they're usually able to address the questions in a prompt, efficient manner.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback off of that, Mark, I think, and Colin, I think setting the expectations with your clients and your transferees is just key, especially when they're going into a foreign country that they've never been to, or a city that they've never gone to, or a situation, a housing situation that they've never stayed at. Corporate living, we do have a single point of contact, and what that means, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're always going to talk to the same person no matter what time of the day they call. Because as you said, Mark, we're operating in a tri-regional model, so but they will always get somebody from corporate living no matter what time of day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's obviously done through our internal technology, so everyone's up to speed on what's going on with that particular situation if they need to pull up that file. But in terms of a single point of contact, we can do it on a corporate housing basis. It's just, like I said, done as a company, not necessarily an individual person. If that makes sense.
Yeah, by the way, I want to jump on that as well. When we do provide a single point of contact, it adds an extra layer, an extra step, which is before any move, we have a meeting with all the parties involved, and that single point of contact from Paramount has to prep themselves on the customs clearance procedures in each country, has to collect all the written documentation so that they can funnel it all to the transferee and provide that pre-move timeline. It also means that that single point of contact has to be available basically 24/7, on cell phone or an email. So it can create some complexities, but it is possible when our clients require it, and we still can provide a high level of service with that model.
Great. I'd like to just touch on a little bit about the communication piece. I mean, effectively, with our technology, we do have a communication center built within our technology so that people can communicate. They can use the app to communicate. But I think what we're seeing, which most important, is to really meet the customer where they're at. And so if that means texting, if that means emails, if that means using the technology, I think that's really important because not everybody is 100% one way or the other. And there's so many forms of communication now. I think it's just really vital to meet the customer where they're at in terms of communicating.
That's a really good point, Stephanie. So establishing what type of communication that particular person wants, I think, is key. To your point, most people like to text now. They don't like to pick up the phone and make a phone call, but I think you're exactly right. Establishing what their level of comfort with their communication style is like is crucial to the process overall.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, everybody. And now to Alicia, for the corporate perspective, how do you coordinate these various global service providers for your assignments?
Well, I'll talk about immigration first because if you think about it, everything hinges on immigration. So we like to manage that very closely, and we work directly with our immigration provider to ensure we have, proper work authorization. Nothing can really happen until you have that. So that's kind of a separate situation. And then the rest of our services, we would authorize through our relocation company, and they would reach out to household good provider, destination services provider, tax provider, etc. And I think that that's managed pretty well. I couldn't possibly do it all myself. There's only 2 people on my team at Sensata, so I really need my providers to partner with us. There's no way that I could initiate every little thing and manage it and track it. So, I know how much work that is and really appreciate that. As it is, when there are exceptions, I get questions. So I'm getting emails from several different providers every day, maybe about the same employee. And so that single point of contact, I just think it's impossible. It sounds great, but when I went to Michigan, so I just had a domestic move, I experienced it for myself. All I was having was household goods shipment, but I heard from the relocation company, the household goods shipment company. I heard from the person who was going to create some fragile items. And, there's just no way that you would be able to have one person telling me everything. I think that for employees, it's important for them, like Colin said, to have a timeline and maybe a visual of what's going to happen. because it's a little hard to understand. I was comfortable because I knew what was happening. I knew who these people were. But if this was your first move, and especially if you're going internationally, I can imagine, how daunting it would be to be hearing from a tax providers. Like Mark said, you do have to have one from each country to get into the specifics. And temporary housing, immigration, it's pretty challenging, I think, to say, oh, we're going to have one point of contact for the employee.
Yeah, there's a lot to manage there, and we certainly appreciate your understanding on the corporate level. So thank you for that, and thank you everybody for sharing your thoughts. The next question, we're going to start with Mark and then go down the line. Mark, there is no one comprehensive global law that governs data privacy. In fact, there are more than one in some countries like the United States. How do you ensure compliance with these data privacy regulations like GDPR on a global scale?
Well, data privacy regulations are dynamic and continue to evolve. Based on this, as well as the many jurisdictions where we coordinate tax services, we appointed a data privacy and security officer. He works closely with VeriSafe, who's a third-party advisor on global data privacy and security topics, to ensure GTN is compliant with local data privacy regulations. We also utilize data privacy agreements with RMCs and foreign tax offices so everyone understands their applicable responsibilities related to data privacy. And when it comes to sharing data with clients or assignees, RMCs, or foreign tax offices, we utilize our secure portal in order to keep the client data secure and safe. And then finally, GTN undergoes an annual SOC 2 Type 2 audit that tests our systems and our compliance with data privacy requirements. And we also provide our team members with annual data privacy and data security training to reinforce compliance and best practices. So there's a number of steps that we take to ensure compliance, and it's just an ongoing process due to the number of changes that occur each year.
Certainly a brave new world out there with everybody trying to steal everybody's information. And of course, with tax firms and immigration firms, we share a lot of data. And so it's absolutely important, it's paramount that we protect that data, not just to be in compliance with these global and local regulations, but to protect our clients, but to protect our clients' privacy and their data. So of course, we at GTN definitely take that very seriously. And I experience it every day when I type in 7 different passwords every day to log into my computer in various systems, and then change them regularly, and then call IT when I forget. Stephanie, do you have something you wanted to add?
No, I mean, we operate in a very similar manner to GTN with regard to the testing and the third-party provider. I think what's interesting is internally we've started to, we've been running our own phishing scans to see how many employees click on what's, phishing emails, which fortunately are, run by our internal team. And so just the ongoing, just really the ongoing, I guess, insurance that that the data is kept safe, that the data is kept secure, and that our own employees really are following protocols and regulations. So because, yeah, exactly, to Mark and Steve, to your point, we have a lot of important data, and we absolutely have to keep it secure.
Thank you for that. Does anybody else have anything they want to add on their end, their perspective? Global data privacy. Fine. All right, we'll move on to the next question here. We're going to start off with John for this one. What role does technology have in managing your service delivery model?
So Steve, thanks for that question. When it comes to technology in the corporate housing space, there's really 2 cases to consider, the internal technology and the external technology. With regard to external, what clients really see and touch, we know that in today's world, the most important thing is for them to access the information and be able to do so at a timely fashion. Not necessarily the ability to purchase quickly and easily, but rather the ability to be able to, and also have the ability to weigh options so that you can make the informative decision on what direction you're going to go in. In regards to corporate livings technology and how it relates to corporate housing, it's important to consider the old school, personally focused relationship when you're interacting with clients and or buyers. We're in such a high touch industry, so that it's so important that all of our technology interfaces do have a workaround to get directly in touch with that individual or transferee when needed. We do want automation, but not just for the sake of automation. So not all tasks within corporate housing can be programmed. When it comes to our technology internally, it becomes incredibly important to have strong processes in place within your data management interface, whether it be an off-the-shelf tech solution or an in-house built customized product. Maintain a comprehensive overview of all potential data points regarding each service performed within corporate housing, both for historical record keeping and current duty of care, really ensures that the service will always be consistent and at the best utmost consistency for the end user. Internally, tech data programs are just as important as the suppliers published externally for direct client usage. So that's my take on that, Steve.
Thank you, John. Anybody else has something they want to add for technology?
You know, I always find it interesting when we look at our service scores for customer service from varied coordinators within the group. And oftentimes, even though we have such higher level of technology now, the highest service scoring coordinators often are the ones who pick up the phone the most and who develop that personal relationship and high level of touch with that transferee. Regardless whether it's texting or automated email, it seems that we find that still that's a preferred method of communication, and it's often one that results in the highest level of service for our clients.
You know, Colin, it's our mutual friend Andy once said in a meeting, and I'm not going to quote it correctly, but something along the lines of technology is the first thing that's asked for out of a service provider, and probably the first thing forgotten about once the engagement starts. Something to always be considered, the actual importance of technology.
And to piggyback off that, Steve, I think as we all know, we're in such a high-touch model service industry directly with our transferees that sometimes technology in certain areas becomes obsolete. It is important to have it. To your point, it becomes a box checker in most RFPs or different situations. But a lot of times, to your point, the transferee or the end user, whoever you're talking to, wants to talk directly with somebody, whether it's over the phone, texting, or through email.
Thanks, Jim. Anybody else want to add in there? Alicia, do you want to tell us how how you utilize the technology when managing your assignees?
Yes, so this is a great topic, and I appreciate all of the comments so far. So interesting, you're right. During an RFP, we all want to see the technology. What do you have? How fancy is it? I will say, from an employee perspective, I think you're right. We want that personal touch. I think they appreciate the phone call, the responsiveness. So that's really important. You can't automate all of this. But from my perspective as a global mobility manager, I really do want technology that is intuitive and easy to access. I want to be able to find things when I need them and do that on my own. I don't want to have to wait for time zones and people to be, online. So the technology is very important to me. I need to make sure that the provider is uploading documents too and keeping notes. So especially those notes between the employee and the relocation provider, just so I know what's going on, because sometimes they call me and then I don't know what's happening. And of course, I can't be involved in every single step of the way. But so technology is real important. And also making sure that all of the data that I need is there. So sometimes, you go look for something, it's not there, and now you have to reach out and wait. So in that way, it is really important from my perspective.
And I'm sure you've gotten that last meeting invite to a meeting with either your superior or somebody that you work with, and you have to pull reporting very, very quickly from your suppliers. And you can't wait more than 10 minutes to get that reporting. So I couldn't agree more. The technology is needed. It's definitely needed in so many areas of what we do. And that kind of piggybacks off of what you said on the corporate side.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Those reports are important too. So being able to have some self-service is important. But, never does it take the place of that human interaction.
Yeah, I'd say from an immigration perspective with regard to technology, what's really interesting is the way that technology plays a role in how different governments utilize it. So for example, you have governments like Singapore that are all online, and then you have the US government that's very paper-based with regard to immigration processes. So I know that for our technology, we've really tried to adapt it to utilize technology in the US space. And then it's been interesting to see that with COVID happening, since COVID has, I'd say since March, seeing the US government adapt to technology usage. So for example, electronic postings of LCA data, notices, et cetera. And so I think that, as governments utilize more technology, it's even more critical that we have technology where we are, regulated in the government space.
I did have one question that came in that's kind of, I guess maybe sort of relates to this. So I'm going to throw this out there right now. Unless Mark, do you have something you want to comment on technology?
Let's say I have the question.
Okay, well, here's a question. So the person did not give their name for this question, but it's regarding COVID, of course. How has COVID, or the recent pandemic, affected your ability to provide your services globally and locally, and how are you adapting? And this is for anybody who wants to jump in.
I can jump in quickly and just give a very high view of it. On a corporate housing level, it is absolutely, sadly, it's eliminated a lot of the service providers and partners that we use on a global scale. There's no doubt about that. I mean, that's not a secret to anything. And I think it just goes back to my last statement, or my first statement, I should say, in the first segment, that communication's key to create a bond or a better relationship with you and your service providers is more important now than ever to make sure that everyone's doing okay, and or at least the ones that you're going to utilize and work with, no matter what country it is or what city it is. So I think it comes down to just being more in touch with your supply chain more than ever, and not just having an annual review once a year to check your SLAs. I think it's about the constant communication that you're having with one another to know and just know what's going on in their world, and vice versa. They want to know what's going on in our world. So
I'd say from a tax service provider standpoint, GTN has historically had about 25 to 30% of its employees in the US working remotely full-time anyway. So we already had the processes and the technology and the infrastructure in place to quickly move the rest of our team right in the middle of tax season to everyone working from home. And it was amazing how quickly everyone adapted to it who had previously been in an office setting. And so other than that, there's been very little impact. A lot of the work that we've historically done has been done virtually in terms of working with overseas foreign tax offices to get the work done. Obviously things like Zoom make it a lot more easy to have that kind of face-to-face interaction. But I'd say, the fact that we were able to quickly pivot and move all of our employees during the busiest time of our year without any sort of service interruption was huge for us.
This was certainly a challenge when it comes to household goods. With our service, we're actually putting people in homes in close quarters with customers, and it required us to move really fast and to put procedures into place regarding making sure the crew members are wearing masks, making sure they're temperature checked when they come into the office. That's still a procedure we have today. And then, of course, providing hand sanitizer, and then, with the actual assignees, having to deal with the difficult scenario of making sure that they're wearing masks to protect the crew and the movers while they're in the home. We had one case where we got to a residence, this was probably in April or May, and the doorman, even though the assignee had received documentation, asking them to notify us if they had been in contact with anyone with COVID or had it themselves. When I had one of my own crews get to a residence, the doorman said to my crew leader, that woman had COVID, and she just got out of the hospital a week ago. And of course, that was like, stop everything, right? Call the office, call the transferee. And she ended up apologizing profusely, and she had a letter from the state, which said that she was good, but it still provided a scare, and it's still a concern that we have not only for our clients but also for our employees.
Yeah, I think it's almost your standards as a company has to be the same standards as your suppliers, whether in culture. I think you have to echo that with your supply chain in a sense. Good point, Colin.
And going back, I guess, back to the technology piece, you know, where we are at Envoy, we were founded in 1998. So, and we were founded as a immigration service provider coupled with the proprietary technology. So we've had 22 years in the technology and immigration space. And what we've really seen during COVID is how important and vital the technology piece is, especially when you're working with, you know, with you know, people located all over the world, whether it's the HR teams or whether it's the you know, foreign nationals or employees. And so, you know, we rolled out our 4.0 recently, and really, I mean, again, if anything, I think COVID has showcased, you know, how important technology is in this space, and really how far advanced we are within the immigration space with our technology, and it's just really become critical, especially during COVID.
And Stephanie, that's a really good point. I mean, we're all seeing it right now, real time, that we're using Zoom to connect with one another. And to manage the supply chain globally, and Colin, I'm sure you've experienced this as well. You have to get on a plane sometimes and go see some of your suppliers at different areas of the world. Right now, as we know, that's very much restricted from us doing that. So we have to keep in touch with them through different ways of technology. So Stephanie, that's an unbelievable point in terms of how we're interacting with one another and how we're keeping those relationships and that vetting process as strict as possible through technology.
I just would like to make a comment to say that, you know, it has been very amazing. We've still been able to relocate people during this time. And like Colin said, you know, all of the protective procedures have been in place and our employees have been able to move safely. And the business continuity. So it didn't miss a beat, any of us. You know, we just kept going. Like you said, this really is kind of one of those situations where if you didn't have technology, we wouldn't have been able to keep going. So it's so important. And Stephanie, thinking about the technology, like with the USCIS and just the different immigration forms and documents, they have flexed a lot because we can now actually scan a photo of a signature page and use that, and that's really amazing. So it is a great thing that we have technology. I even found, Mark, you were talking about how Zoom or whatever has helped you to really know people more, and we've started having our monthly calls with providers in other countries, so the partner, you know, tax offices. And now I've seen their faces, where before it was just a phone call. So it kind of brings us together more in some ways.
In some ways. I mean, it is interesting how the pandemic is really forcing our hand to adapt. And we're having a lot of creativity and a lot of innovative you know, businesses really help us progress in a way that we've not done before. So it's I think, you know, if there is good things to come out of the pandemic, that's certainly one of them. Any other questions before I move on, or comments? All right. Now we're going to go to Colin for this question, and everyone else can, of course, offer their thoughts as well. But invoicing, how is invoicing handled globally? Hey, Colin, I think you might have.
Sure. Really, it's what the preference is of our corporate client. Of course, in the United States, we're invoicing in U.S. dollars, but oftentimes we have to pay an office overseas or an agent in euros or in any foreign currency. So it does require us to have the ability to pay in just about any currency that is required by a supplier or an office. You know, but then again, we're having to deal with the exchange rate and having to then invoice in US dollars here in the States. However, we have an office in Germany where, you know, we'll invoice in euros. We have an office in the UK where we'll invoice in pounds. So it really is where we have a client and what their requirements are.
I'd say for most of our clients, we take on the role of coordinating the global billing, so receiving all of the invoices directly from our foreign offices so that we can manage scope, ensure that the work that's being done has been pre-approved and is within the scope of the approved services, so that the client isn't getting surprise invoices from foreign offices and having to manage the different contacts with so many different offices and manage the exchange rate issues as well. So we take all that on for our clients.
Yeah, and Steve, my answer is pretty much going to echo exactly what Colin said, that we take the direction of the client in terms of how we invoice on a global scale. So there's not going to be much difference in my answer from Colin's.
All right, and Alicia, from the corporate perspective, what do you think works best for you?
Well, you know, it would be awesome to push a button and see where did we spend our money this year and have like an instant year-to-date log. We do try to consolidate some of our billing. So we have our relocation provider. We pass through a lot of the costs through the relocation provider, and they have reports that we can look up by expense category and see how much we spent. We don't do that with everything though, and personally it makes me a little bit nervous to have one provider seeing all of our invoices when sometimes it's not related to a relocation, such as an immigration. You know, we have a lot of immigration cases that have nothing to do with relocation. So, you know, we have separate invoices from separate vendors, but we do manage that centrally. So we like it to be in US dollars. And we really appreciate that you do all of that conversion for us and make it easier. And also, like Mark said, from the tax perspective, we do the same thing. We'd like to have that globally managed. So all around the world, the offices would send the charges, you know, to our account manager so that we can, you know, not be having to decide, oh, is this right? Did that happen? It's already been looked at beforehand. So a lot of work goes into invoicing. You know, we like to have as few invoices as possible because it's a lot of work for us too, looking at where do we charge this out to. So it's helpful when you put the cost centers and other identifying information on the invoice for us, and that makes it easier for us to charge those costs out at the end of the day. It's important to have the visibility into the spend though. So at the end of the year, you can look, okay, how much did we spend on immigration? How much did we spend on tax? How much did we spend, you know, for relocation and all the various services that come through there? So, you know, we appreciate the work that you do to help us with that, because it's so important in the business to be able to see, you know, what are we spending our money on? And we have to report that to finance, and it's part of the budgeting for the year too. So it's helpful when you can give us estimates and things like that when we need it.
Oh, and Alicia, just to, you know, showcase exactly what you're discussing, one of the things we do have built into our technology is a spend analysis dashboard. So the button you mentioned you'd like to press, we actually do have that available, because we have had time and time again customers request you know, instantaneous information to what the spend is. And in addition to that, also being able to forecast, which is exactly what you're talking about in terms of what do things look like. So so yes, absolutely being able to pivot to, you know, what corporate needs and how instantly they need it. That, you know, that's critically important right now.
Yeah.
All right. All right, now I got some questions from the audience here. This one's from Andy Acasella. As we hopefully soon transition out of the COVID-19 pandemic, the mobility space's supply chain will need to be reinvented based on the varied financial impact. I am curious to know what each of you are doing to prepare for this new norm as it pertains to your supply chain. It's an easy one. Don't all jump at once.
So I can jump in a little bit. I kind of touched upon some of those points. You know, definitely keeping a more strict supply chain, and what I mean by that is more communication than ever with the suppliers that we use, both domestically and internationally, is crucial right now. Constantly being engaged with them, constantly doing credit checks, Dun and Bradstreet, financial checking on how they're doing. I think that's more important than ever right now. And when you've worked with companies for 20 or so years, I think you definitely have that relationship with them where there's going to be communication around how everyone's doing and how they're doing. So it's tough right now. I think that's a great question from Andy. That now more than ever we have to be on top of that. And again, I think it's not just taking a lead and just sending it out to your entire supply chain and see who can handle it. It's more knowing who's going to handle it and feeling comfortable with that. And I think it becomes quality over quantity at that point. So.
Fair enough. Anybody else have something to add?
Yeah, what I would say is from a global perspective, and this alludes to what was brought up earlier in the conversation, is that so last year we saw global immigration grow by over 60% at Envoy, and then this year January and February, to be transparent, we're also in growth stages, but this month we're about to have the third best month in the entire year. So as Alicia was saying, like, people are still relocating, they're still moving, and it's different, and we've had to pivot very quickly. But at the same time, and I know we're hearing a lot of financial, varying financial impacts depending on country, but we're seeing things go back to normal, to be honest, and almost back to growth mode. So so that's my take on it. But to John's point, just really keeping an eye on those suppliers who may be more financially impacted, where there were shutdowns, like in India, where people were not traveling in and out, domestically was even a challenge, and varying locations like that. But I'm happy to say that we're almost back to normal. So.
And in the corporate housing space, it's really about how companies are structured, right? Are you a company that has thousands of long-term inventory all over the globe? Or are you a company that does match leasing? Or are you a company that works with other partners? So I think it's important to know from a corporate housing perspective exactly how your partners are structured and how your properties are structured. And when you know that, I think you can also make another assessment behind the scenes on how well they're doing during something like this.
Well, I certainly like Stephanie's comments on sort of an upbeat note. Appreciate hearing that.
We need that, Stephanie.
Yes.
I honestly don't think we've seen the full fallout yet, and I think we still have a year, really, that until we're going to see that some companies maybe be consolidated or purchased by competitors. For us, the summer season is always the busy season in household goods, and that carries those revenues carry the company, all household goods companies, through the slower season, which is in the winter and into the spring. So I think it's really going to be for us, a waiting game to see what happens. But we do have to keep a close eye on it. And of course, if you're working with a financially sound company before COVID, hopefully they have the staying power to make it through this kind of pandemic. And much to like John said, that's dependent upon, do they have physical assets, employ their own employees, or do they are they more of a model where they're utilizing contractors? So that's important for us to keep an active eye on.
Yeah, from a corporate perspective, just for all of the suppliers and providers that we utilize, we have seen a lot of employees wanting to delay their move. So they're waiting until the first quarter. Even with immigration, Stephanie, we can't do a lot of things until after this executive order lets up, if ever, because we can't bring people into the U.S. right now. But we're hoping that come January or Q1, we'll be able to start having people move again. So they're kind of on hold right now. So hopefully we're going to see you'll see a big boom at that time.
Fingers crossed. So I got a question in here. Actually got a few questions coming in. So here's one from Nicole Zakara. Question for the group. Have any of you started using Teams, Skype for video calls instead of regular calls? Do you think this should continue after COVID?
So the answer is yes, of course. We all are utilizing these on probably a daily basis. I think they'll continue after COVID. I hope that they're definitely going to continue, and I think it's going to be on people's comfort level. Some people are able and wanting to meet now even, and some people still want to go back to utilizing technologies like we're using now, Zoom or webinars or whatever it might be. So I think they'll still continue to be utilized. I don't think it's going to be as heavy as it is now in terms of how much we're using it. But I think it's going to be case by case, company culture by company culture, and somebody's personal comfortability with meeting face to face. So.
Yeah, at GTN, we use Zoom for the past 4 years for a lot of internal calls because we have teammates across the country, and so it helps to promote connectivity. But we found now more of an acceptance amongst clients and assignees to use it instead of just having a conference call. And I find it really helps to have that kind of face-to-face connection if you can't meet in person, to be at least be able to see the people you're talking to rather than doing everything over the phone. Personally, I find Teams to be a bit wonky, so we kind of rolled that out this year, and it's kind of hit or miss in terms of the video quality. So definitely my preference would be Zoom, but sometimes the client set up the call, we don't have a choice.
Yeah, good point.
All right, so I have a question from Sarah Foley-Kurth. This is for Alicia. As an employer, how often do you evaluate your service providers and vendors? Do you do it annually, quarterly? And then what tools do you find most essential to keep a handle on how employees are finding their experience with these providers and ensure you are getting what the company needs? Do you do surveys, RFPs, that sort of thing?
Good question. So I'm new to Sensata, just been here a year, and so we regularly go through the RFP process. It's part of the company's mandate. So some of that's not up to me. We just need to review our spend and go out to market and take a look and see what's out there. So actually right now, this year, we're involved in several RFPs at the same time. So if I look calm, I'm not. We've been very busy, and it's good for me because I get to meet a lot of people and find out what other companies do, and so it's really helpful. So just thinking about how we find out if things are going well. My personal management style is to partner with our providers. So I have regular calls with everyone. With our tax provider, and not just our account management, but in the countries where we are. So we have like a bi-monthly call with the teams in each country. And with our relocation provider, we meet every 2 weeks. Same with immigration. So we're constantly checking to make sure we don't drop the ball anywhere and to make sure we're following up and to hear feedback. So employees will generally come to us if they have any challenges or issues. If not, they go to their manager, but ultimately it comes to us. So when that happens, I expect and I will provide that feedback to our provider and ask them to reach out to that employee, because like we already agreed, sometimes that phone call or personal touch is going to make a difference. So if somebody's disgruntled, but you reach out and talk to them about it, that's going to help a lot. So I always make sure that we respond when we have feedback that's negative, and I'll call the employee myself too. So we do have like annual reviews. So you'd go over like, what happened in the past year, what are we going to do next year, where were our successes, what do we need to work on. We do that like once a year, but as I said, we have these calls ongoing, so we're kind of addressing things all the time as they come up. Similar to like your performance reviews, you don't want to wait till the end of the year. You want to discuss it at that time. I hope that answers your question.
We'll never know because she's not speaking. You are.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a good answer, so thank you for that, and thank you for that question. John Schultz, thank you for your question. We did, I think, address that with respect to the U.S. government's position on inbound immigration. We did have a question from Francine Davidson, section 2 questions. Can you please explain the difference between SLA and KPI? And then she had a follow-up question, which I can't find. I'll get to that later if I can find it again. Yeah, what are the SLAs? What are the SLAs that are most effective? Is there a follow-up question to that? Anybody? We're almost out of time anyway.
Well, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just going to say I threw out the term, so I feel responsible for that question. So basically, a SLA, I'd say the key difference is like a KPI is a metric, right, based on which you're performing to your SLAs, and then the SLAs are agreements that you put in place in terms of things like response time, right? How quickly does your vendor perform? How quickly will you get back to the employee if there's a question? If there's an application being filed, once you receive all the documentation, how quickly will you turn around that into an application process, into an application and file the application? So those are SLAs, and then KPIs are really how are you performing? What's the metrics on the SLAs? Are you meeting those metrics? How are the vendors going to be judged? In terms of like they have to meet this 90% of the time, or they have to meet something else 80% of the time. So, that's the way I think about it. Is just sort of concrete. The SLAs are concrete. How quickly things need to be addressed, and then the KPIs are you achieving that? So that's it. So Alicia, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I was just going to say to get to a more granular level, it's service level agreement and key performance indicator, in case that's the question too, because not everybody knows the terms. And you would probably, during your RFP or when you contract with a provider, you would go through the service level agreement to say, okay, how long is it going to take to get a cost estimate? Is it 3 days? Is it 5 days? How long is it going to take for you to respond to an employee, like you said? And then key performance indicators, you might use those as, all right, we're not getting our cost estimates. It's taken 12 days. You're not meeting that metric. So just to kind of add a little bit to what you just said.
All right. Well, I think that about does it. We're a little bit over, but I think that's okay. We actually got to all of the questions. There are a few comments in there. Ralph Gourmet did say that this was much better than the debate last night, although I think that's a pretty low bar to beat, but at least we did that. But with that, I think we're just going to wrap things up. I want to say thank you again to all of our panelists, John Verrell of Corporate Living, Mark Tirpak of GTN, Stephanie Lewin of Envoy Global, Alicia Browne of Sensata Technologies, and Colin LaBrie of Paramount Transportation. That's it, everybody. Stay tuned for more information, upcoming webinars. This webinar will be available on our website. We'll send an email out to everybody that's registered. I'll also make a notice on my LinkedIn page, so follow me on LinkedIn. In the meantime, stay safe, everybody. Keep working hard. Things are going to continue to get better. And register to vote. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Steve.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.